I get emotional about it because even when something's broken, even when it's destroyed in front of you and you know, like, man, I wanted so much for this, there's a real beauty in knowing, hey, that thing that didn't work, I gave it everything I had.
Dane Cook is one of the most prolific stand-up comedians of all time, selling out some of the biggest venues on earth, setting Guinness World Records for doing so. He was actually the first physical album and only physical album I've ever purchased from a stand-up comedian. He has a new stand-up special, Above It All, that's for sale on his website right now that he produced with his own money. In this conversation, we get into some really interesting stuff. Physical health, mental health, his one true love. We even talk about doom scrolling late at night. I think you're gonna find this very valuable. Hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Let's get started. I want to share something with you because you've inspired me in ways that you probably inspired so many millions of lives to fall in love with stand-up comedy. Coming to the United States from Russia, I was an immigrant, knew nothing about stand-up comedy, 6 years old, growing up with my Soviet father. Jokes were not something that he shared a lot with. But I remember the only disc I ever bought comedy-wise was Harmful of Swallow.
Is that right?
The only one ever. And I treasured this thing. It was like amazing to me. And then watching your series on HBO with my friends.
Yeah.
You brought me into the world of stand-up comedy. So I owe you a huge debt of gratitude.
Well, man, first of all, thank you for that. That's an incredible, start too, to be able to reflect on that. Just recently, I found my first physical version that I took.
Wow.
Having edited it, having designed all that cover art, and then sitting there recently with the very first one, right? It's like, where is this going to travel in the world? Is it ever going to leave the trunk of my car where I sell a couple after shows? And I was sitting holding the very first, now the one that was even before my record deal. This was the one that I just made that, like, I may never get a record deal. This is
that you burned yourself.
I burned myself, the whole track listing on the back, that's my handwritten.
Wow.
Because I was just editing and writing down ideas for what I think could have been the track listing. And so I found it recently. I had it and I was staring at it thinking, like, wow, there's so many moments that people have written me about how this has impacted their life, not even realizing how much this impacted my own life. Yeah. And allowed me to feel like I could have a conversation like this all these years later with people that had a kind of a turning point comedy moment with me at the same exact time. So look at us.
How are you so hands-on? I mean, it's awesome, but new for that generation to be so hands-on with the business, to be able to be thinking about promoting yourself, selling, burning CDs, because nowadays that kind of makes sense with social media.
Yeah, it's definitely a more par for the course to be your own fulfillment center and have to think outside of the box. As a matter of fact, it's the best possible thing for creatives to realize you never really were in the box. The industry for a long time made us feel like there's a protocol and a rigmarole, but the truth is, if you can think outside of the box and live outside of it, they're ultimately looking for you to show them, how do we bring more people to our viewership. I wish I could say, oh, it was all, because I thought I was ahead of the pack. I thought I was so behind the pack. And I felt so fundamentally, I guess in some ways, fundamentally dismissed by the industry. I was arrogant and cocky and cocksured enough to think I've arrived and I'm new and I'm excited, and that, I guess that means they punch your ticket and say you're in.
Yeah.
And that
wasn't
no. It was such a thud in some ways when I felt like I arrived, that after about 2 years of doing gigs, feeling like I wasn't hitting the bullseye, and then finally realizing, wow, the only way I think I'm ever going to get any attention to what I love doing is to try to make an album myself. And then I just hit the library and started trying to realize how do you do this alone without the resources.
And you didn't have YouTube back in the day to go on and say how to sell an album or make an album.
What did I have? I think it was like an early version of like, this is what I would do. I would go on AOL Instant Messenger.
Oh my God. Okay.
Right?
What was your screen name?
G-Dane 19.
Mine was Mr. Funny Mike.
I'd go on there, and believe it or not, wow, you just like jarred this back into my mind. I would get on there, and I would start conversations with random people that were maybe had picked up my screen name through the website, through my website. And I would just start asking people like, what do you do? And if I met somebody really smart who was like, oh, I'm a businessman, I'd be like, I have business questions. And I'd start asking, I'd say, I'm trying to figure out, and I really felt like I was learning legalese and learning business and getting my, what do they say, like the street level college education. I felt like I was, believe it or not, my fans, beyond just like being fans, were helping me in another way, which was educating me sometimes as to, I would ask them, hey, do you know how I do this? I was growing up with them.
Yeah, I mean, our generation is so unaware of this because we're the most connected, disconnected generation. I would say.
Yeah, very much so.
And I applaud your mental toughness during times of rejection from the industry, because I see it with some of my friends that are in the business, or even for me, just trying to go on media as a medical expert, but being young and being prejudged. So I'm curious what strategies you used for yourself mentally when you were getting rejected left and right, but still motivated yourself to get on the hot dog stand.
It was get on the hot dog stand. Yeah. It was, well, it really started with having a better, there was a lot, this is a lot to unpack because I had to start, I felt like I was so far ahead in terms of confidence in my comedy. But I felt like I was so far behind in confidence in me. And I lacked a lot of things that I lacked, like real self-love. Not that I didn't feel loved, but I would get it from my mom, or I could get it from a comedy show, or it seemed like there were certain things to fill the void, but I struggled with being able to really look in the mirror and have it was like I was almost building up the career of this other person.
Okay, so you were dissociating almost.
Yeah. It was like I could at times really feel like a pat on the back moment, but I was most often guilty of allowing my dejected feeling to become my value. Like the times when I was dismissed or felt like for whatever reason that I wasn't being embraced, I let that become the litmus of like, I guess I'm not worth it. And it was almost like every single day I'd have to really get up and build myself up. And sometimes that's so exhausting that you're like, not today. Today I'll just sit in it. So
did you have days like that where you're like, nope, not doing this today?
I did just because I was like so disheartened that, man, I started to feel really good this week. And now it was like, I just didn't have the right nutrition of affirmation and meditation and the right probably people are surrounding me to where great love and friendship is when we can acknowledge like, what do you want to talk about? Like really and those simple little conversations sometimes just, kind of bring you right back to the non-ruminating and back to the realities of what you've accomplished.
The support system is crucial because we always talk about it in medicine. Like one of the biggest factors in whether or not someone does well with a condition mentally is based on their support system. And support system doesn't always mean mental health specialists or doctors. Right. It's about loved ones, friends, maybe religious counsel. Were you surrounded by people that were not adequately giving you that? Or did you have some on both sides of that?
Yeah, I think I had the right balance of, well, starting with my mother, she was so incredibly compassionate, sensitive because of she'd gone through her own or had continued to go through just a multitude of hardships.
Yeah,
things that from phobia to anxiety. We would go to Al-Anon meetings together sometimes because we dealt with things in our home that were capsizing, and it just seemed like my mom more than anybody was the example to me of like, when you're really feeling stuck, you have to reach out. There are resources somewhere. So she was that for me, because she was the liaison to a lot of, she was a wealth of information, even though sometimes she could be spinning herself. She could remind you, feet on the ground, you start, you rub your thighs, you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, 8-second breath in. And she could, in those little reminders of, it starts with just be good to yourself right now, your health and wellness. She would always say, you get up, take that walk. An idle mind is a devil's workshop kind of thing. And she taught me to find those people in my life who could help facilitate, conversations like this. And so she was the first. And then over the years, a lot of people that, to this day, I rely on for those moments.
Who's like your person right now?
My person right now is, I think that my fiance and I are that for each other. We have really prolific conversations about everything. But when it comes to just behaviors and being able to be really transparent about when you're feeling that when you're feeling that high in life of like, I'm doing something exceptional and being able to have that embraced, as opposed to sometimes, I don't know if it's just the way the industry has become or society. Sometimes people are afraid to like step out and say, look at me, I've done something that I think is really special.
Yeah.
Because there's more access for, unfortunately, people to make you feel diminished because for whatever reason, that's just like the way society sometimes it wants to keep everything in that same mediocrity type of place. And Kelsey and I just, it's a powerful conversation to have with her because we've never not been absolute truth for one another. So she's probably the person that I'm most excited to start the day and end the day because we talk like this all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she's helping you celebrate your wins in a way that's not judgmental.
Yes. And also helping me and helping each other when there's a loss to really fully recognize no placating. What happened? Where was I less than? Where did I maybe rush things, didn't rivet in something that should have been? Or is it just that's the way the universe works sometimes? And like, we got to scrap this one as like, gave it a shot. There's probably data in there, but not for now, for years from now.
Wow. So you're calling each other on your bullshit too.
All the
you
time.
have that transparency.
In the funniest, best possible way.
What's a good example of that?
Oh man. I didn't even know if I could say. It's like, we can, you're not going to, first of all, you're not going to be with a comedian without some,
banter, of course.
Some hardcore banter. And even though she's a comedian, sometimes I say she could be because she's pretty good at like, I'll just say this: we'll counterpoint the crap out of each other, okay. And it's always festive. Let's say that for this time of year.
But it's great because it's so humbling to have your roots set, because that's what essentially a good relationship is, right? It's finding your roots in another where you can be in a safe place to be yourself, and meaning safe place to make a mistake.
Oh yeah. And there's more of that than anything, right? Yeah. It's really like if you're a person that gets up and meets challenges, then what are challenges? Normally it's, hitting the wall, or you find more obstacles when you're going for the challenge, right? And with Kelsey and I, it's funny, many years ago, I was in a great 2-year therapy situation, and I was learning so much about boundaries and really what that word meant, and where I had it, where I completely just abandoned the idea of it. There was a time in my life where it's like, no, if people want to be close, I can let them in. Yeah. It's okay, I can pop them out if they're not like. And with Kelsey and I think it's and I know that she could say the same thing as we've talked about it. It's the first time for both of us that we really feel like those boundaries are so solidly in place, and we love that we both know where they are for each other. To be able to share that and identify the things that you go, this is where I can journey to with people, but the fact that we know each other enough to go so far beyond that, and it's still like holding each other's power in the most loving, safe, funny, respectful way. And I have a few friendships like that as well, but it's great to be able to have it with the woman I love.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's especially in this day and age when social media, when you're at the top of whatever industry you're in, whether it's sports, Hollywood, medicine, there's always something that you're going to do wrong, and social media will tear you down. Do you ever doom scroll? Do any of this Reddit reading? Or
no, not like I used to.
Is it a boundary that you set?
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely was.
That's powerful.
Because it was superfluous. None of it ever led to anything constructive.
Okay.
It was always
Just destructive.
always. There was, it was like when you're a kid and you're doing one of those maze puzzles.
Yeah.
And it could be so furious and like you didn't want to over mark it up because you're like, oh, I don't want to have to keep. It would be like if you were doing one of those and then suddenly realized, oh, this is a mistake and they never actually had an ending to this one.
Wow.
You would just be marking it up forever.
That's a great analogy.
And it's funny because when you brought, kind of like dovetailed into this part of the conversation, I didn't realize when you say like you're on top, but that doesn't really, being on top, I think is a precious, congratulatory, more intimate gift given amongst peers. And I don't think that you should seek it out or even deserve to feel like it's going to come from the valley of the internet.
Okay.
I feel like nobody's on top on the internet. I don't really believe that that's a place that you have a victory lap. I think if nothing else, if there is something that's being written up, that's also clickbait, and it's probably only for the organization that thinks they could capitalize off of your moment. I don't think they truly care whether that moment goes beyond what they've written or not. And so the validation in life should never go digital.
So you're almost nihilistic about the digital media space.
Yeah, I love it for so many. I love tech. I love it. I mean,
You're the original pioneer.
Some people have said that, and sometimes I look and I go, I know in comedy for sure. I don't think there was anybody else that probably was so enthralled as I was. I was truly fascinated, curious, enthralled, and then realizing, oh, this is also like my ticket. But no, I think that more and more I appreciate a visit to the internet for something. It's like going to the grocery store. I'd pop in, get a few things I need, and then back to reality.
But your discipline must be through the roof, because I hear everything you're saying. And the maze example could not be a better visualization of the world that is the internet. And yet at night, I'm still tempted. I'm like, oh, I got some free time.
Yeah.
Let's see what folks are saying.
Right.
And then suddenly I wish I didn't see what folks are saying.
I'll do like some TikTok stuff.
Okay.
I'll scroll through there. I think that, I like that with something like TikTok, it's mostly curated off the things that I tend to like to look at, to search for. But yeah, no, I don't usually go beyond there. You want, like, I guess it's the difference of, do you want to be entertained by something where people are using their creative flair on TikTok, or are you going to like suddenly roll into like a BuzzFeed? I don't
Cancel
even
thing,
yeah, exactly. I don't care who they think is or is not canceled or whatever.
I think that's a very
empty calories.
It's a very valuable way to, again, you're looking at something that's quite addicting and looking at it for its value and seeing none and saying, I'm going to abstain.
I'm seeing, and we're seeing what it's doing to young people. And it's, there's no other way to pocket it. It's disgusting. And so many kids are being just like warped by, what they're consuming through the internet.
Well, the number one job that kids say they want to have these days is to be an influencer or YouTuber, not astronaut, not Supreme Court justice, not president, YouTuber.
Right. This would probably be a good time for me to go for those things then, right? I'm sure there's less people in that lane. I might actually be able to fulfill some of those side items.
What was your dream job as a kid?
Let me think. Like dream job. Well, I had a couple, probably the little boy ones were like, I thought I was going to be a stuntman because I watched too many like Burt Reynolds movies. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to, I was jumping out of trees into, piles of leaves. And I did want to be a comedian very early on. I think 13 or 14 is when I had the eureka moment. But prior to that, but I did also love working with animals. So I think that there was like another side of me that was like, I could probably be a vet or do something with horses or something.
Oh, do you have pets?
I do. I have 2 dogs.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
What kind of dogs?
Yeah, we've got a Ridgeback. She's 2, and I've saved a Shepherd Poodle about 7 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, dogs are. You want to talk about like healing energy?
Yeah,
I would recommend to anybody.
Where do you think that healing energy from dogs comes from?
I think that, I guess I've always felt like I grew up with so many different dogs. I think I always felt like dogs sense love in you, and I feel like they know when you're feeling the least of it in yourself, and they will like, you know, almost like come to you as a reminder of this is the love you have inside of yourself.
Dare I venture to say dogs are the opposite of social media?
Dogs are the opposite of social media. I think that they would agree if they could have a voice in this.
Right? Because like social media is there just for the highs and lows, and the dogs are there constant.
Yeah.
And it's not judgmental, right?
But the thing about that I remember the most, one of the lowest, I had a min pin.
Okay.
And his name was Beastie Boy. God rest his soul. He and I remember one of the worst moments of my life. That dog, when I would wake up in the morning, was right there in the bed, super happy to just play and get out. And it was like just putting that leash on him and getting me up and out was like, that was the gift right there. That was like, wow, just seeing my dog happy instead of laying there in bed for however long, letting the wheels spin, was like, I couldn't thank him enough to, want to, get me up and out and into the world.
Because that cycle is real, where you just stay in bed, don't want to get up, are searching for motivation.
Yep.
But motivation really comes after taking action or taking that first step.
Right.
And if you can hack it in a way by getting your dog to encourage you to do it, that's an amazing
I'll tell you, if you keep a dog around, if nothing else, they keep you moving, right?
Well, we also see that he help you live longer. Like that's a proven medical statistic. Dog owners live longer. And we've tried to hypothesize. Is it because of the exercise? Is it the friendship? And we don't know, but it's probably all the factors.
I think it's when you have something or someone to live for. I'm sure that something in the immune system, something in a part of the brain that I know nothing about is probably just driving you further and towards something. It is an incredible, I worked in a nursing home. I was a dietary aide for a few years. And
what made you take that job?
I was 16. I was just looking to make some scratch. And it was, again, like I had to get through high school so I could do stand-up after I graduated. How did I get that job? Actually, I think there was a girl that I liked.
It always is a story.
And I think it was a girl I liked. And so I applied. I got the job. But what I loved about it was I spent a lot of time with the elderly people that were, living at, it was called Mediplex Nursing Home in Lexington, Massachusetts. And I would see the sparkle in their eyes and the excitement when their family was visiting, or even sometimes when myself we'd go around and, just try to entertain them or whatever we could do and I don't know, it impacted me in a way back then of just like joy really keeps you vibrant, and then I'd see the unfortunately the opposite, some people that maybe weren't getting visitors or interestingly enough, some of the people that I got to know, and you could tell that they'd live hard lives, and maybe they were the hard part.
Yeah.
And what that did to their health and wellness. And so it was a beautiful early example of like, just try to keep as much joy and happiness around me as possible.
Yeah, those social connections are so key. Even when we're giving things like modifiable lifestyle factors, we call them in medicine, for the risk of developing Alzheimer's
MLFs,
disease.
we call them.
Yes. We talk about social connections and how that reduces the risk of early dementia. And the joy is the prime aspect of that, because even when you're sitting there talking shit with your friends, arguing, that's joy, right? When you're arguing with your partner, that's joy.
Yeah.
Because you're challenging each other, you're reaching certain goals with one another.
Right.
Do you get that same joy when you're with your friends, with your family?
Yeah, I do. In fact, one of the things that always brings me an incredible amount of enthusiasm with any and all of my relationships is, catching up and saying like, let's check in after, or I've got friends that are movie geeks and we just want to talk about we can't wait to talk about the trailer, or, just knowing those things. It's almost like having those things on your agenda, with family, friends, even with my fans, whether that agenda is, I don't know, tour dates or something I want to talk about, having things to look forward to. When I mentor people, I always start with get the $1 method. I have a pencil, paper, and start writing down a few of the things that you're really looking forward to this year.
Wow.
Tell me a few things that you're looking forward to this year. And it's like, at first it's like, I don't even know, but you do. there's got to be something, even if it's a movie that's open. Maybe there's a new piece of tech, or like literally, let's start with there. And if you start with that, you can go, okay, that's 7 months away. Let's talk about like, now, what are you going to do preparing for those 7 months? It's fascinating. Once you kind of go into that, you start to realize, oh man, like all the possibility is what when you finally meet whatever that moment is, sometimes it's a letdown, right? It's the hype and
but
enthusiasm.
The process was the
process, yeah. So I try to always get people locked into a process, even if they say to me later, man, you got me excited for nothing. I was like, but you're excited.
Yeah. Well, that's a true coping mechanism that we study in psychology, where I theorize that the anxiety and depression spikes that have happened as a result of the pandemic, obviously they happen as a result of less social connections and all those things.
Right.
But because there was less things to look forward to, there was less gatherings, less vacations, less trips.
Yeah.
When I was working in ICU, you're working for 2 months, 6 days a week, 18-hour days. I could work through that 2-month period, no problem, as long as I knew I had something to look forward to at the end of it.
Right.
But the pandemic just stole that from us.
Yeah.
And there was nothing to look forward to.
And there was a moment where we didn't know if we would ever have truly things to look forward to beyond, which was so ominous.
Yeah. What was the pandemic experience for you?
Really, really tough. Tough, and yet in hindsight, it also kind of I did like the ultimate clean out. You know what I mean? Like the ultimate kind of spring cleaning. And really going inward and doing a lot of journaling and realizing, wow, there were some things that I've kind of held on to that have petrified, that I needed to just relinquish power to, or get rid of, or again, just clean house. And so midway through the pandemic, I was like, okay, I need to create something, first of all. That's, what can I do to make people happy right now? This is going to make me feel purpose. I need to have that. And so I put together a charity event. I did like a live read online I had like Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts.
What was the charity?
It was for CORE, which was Sean Penn's organization that was helping out getting people tested for COVID. And it was a table read, virtual table read. And I didn't think that I would get some of the people that I ended up getting. But it was like, wow, a month ago I was so in a rut. And then, 6 weeks later, I had all these tremendous, A-list celebrities coming in, taking time, reading the script. And I was like, oh, I'm really able to provide a little bit of joy in this time that we all felt so encumbered. So doing that, cleaning house, and then kind of coming out of the other side being like, oh, now I have like more of a prime directive of what it is that I want to do in success over, getting through the pandemic.
Did you always have this love for the process through all your years of work in comedy?
I think I did. I remember coming home from school. I'd watch Oprah with my mom. I was such a mama's boy. I'd come home and I'd lay on the bed with her and we'd watch Oprah. She'd eat her Hershey's Kisses. That was one of the things that would, chocolate, I guess, is some kind of
endorphin,
calming, right? And we would watch and discuss the stories or the segments. And I think I had a real strong love, I guess, for why do people do what they do. And it led me to continue to go, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I so hard on I had to learn what I'm an introvert. I had self-loathing. I had, I couldn't speak in public. I wanted to do stand-up comedy, and yet I couldn't even get to school. I was so afraid of my own voice. And yet those shows or, those early discussions, I guess, helped me to figure out there is a way for me to feel like I can have this occupation and live this life, but I got to really know who I am.
And your path to discovery of who you were came through challenges, failures, all of the above?
Yeah, every single one of them you could imagine kind of goes hand in hand with the stand-up comedy career. It's an unforgiving industry. And especially in that era, before there was any kind of, you could not become an overnight sensation on like a YouTube or something then. Which
no virality.
Right. Which by the way, is its own treasure trove of overnight sensation is sometimes the worst possible gift that you think you're earning. But back then, no, it was like you were only going to make it through every trial and tribulation that one could have as a live performer.
And it was set by arbitrary rules with the gatekeepers.
It was, but it was also like, it was such a finicky, tricky job, livelihood, because like an amoeba, it wasn't like it was like one factory that you could go to that necessarily, might have been a couple of comedy clubs that were fixtures, but it was, I'd get to gigs that they'd be like, oh, it's gone. I'd be like, I just booked this 3 nights ago. Nobody showed up night 2. There's nobody in here. And you'd just be driving home 3 hours like, nobody even called. There was nobody there working there to even say,
no one to
this
complain.
place doesn't exist anymore. And it was a constant with my graduating class of comics of all we had was the idea, maybe this could lead to something, but we had each other, and at least we had each other to entertain when sometimes even the crowd maybe wasn't so entertained.
So I could see how those challenges got you to that place. I'm curious how the successes potentially have affected you negatively, because when I know at the top is not the lingo you prefer to use in the social media space, but when you're crushing it, you're setting records, you're selling out Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
You're on top of the world, and you're trying to be insightful. You're trying to challenge yourself. You're trying to see what you're doing wrong. Do you ever lose sight of that? Oh,
yeah, because then it tilts completely there's a time when it's like, just being a young man and ego and, no playbook for success. You go from being a reasonably lower middle class kid, to suddenly you're the belle of the ball. You've got all these access to everything. Every dream is coming to fruition. And even though at the center of it, you're like, okay, it's me and my fans. The one thing I never lost sight of, thankfully, was none of this is possible without a group of people.
Sure.
I'm not in this arena because I did something alone.
Yeah.
Right. And so always had that, the audience is always right in front of you. And if you lose sight in that one thing that's right in front of you, reminding you we're here because you provided and entertain us to make us want to put you in this arena or wherever. But because there's no playbook for it, and then because of now I'm just speaking for myself and not the other comedians that you may chat with or have had experiences, I go from being such an insignificant feeling human being to now feeling like the most significant person on the planet, with no real tools outside of some Oprah episodes and maybe cutting it up with mentors or my mom, or no real professional help, or no real one mentor maybe at that time who could sit down and be like, here's what's happening to you right now. You're believing everything. You're believing the hype. And so, it was capsizing moments simply because you think, I'm in, I got it, I'm here. And for whatever reason, I think you just start believe at a young age, that this will always be.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you treated your audience almost as a religion. You saw the value in community building when that wasn't a thing. Now everyone on social media is like, build a community, target your community, advertise to your community.
Right.
But you were doing that before community building was a thing.
Right.
And because you gave your community this religious power, you respected them, and you kind of felt like they were the greater source of power. You know how people think that there's something greater than them, so it takes some pressure off? Did you feel the same way?
I don't know if I put it in maybe such a faith-based way.
Sure.
I think
I'm not even religious, by the way.
I think I put it in more of I knew that at that time, unlike today, that feels very corporate algorithm. It does feel like there's always a ad spend or a boost or, finagled numbers. It's a little hinky. Then it felt really organic. It just kind of felt like the internet for a good chunk of time was it was still such almost like an experiment, or a place that some people were, but a lot of people were like, what's that fad? Mm-hmm. I think I pretty much, my whole philosophy was I had such a one-on-one connection with a group of people. I had one-on-one understanding and access through this portal that happened to build up so much over time that it turned into masses, because the one-on-one conversations, those thousands and thousands, then millions of people that I let have access to my daily and vice versa, they invited other people into the thing. Or they shared, comedy that they loved. And of course, if you make their friends laugh, then they're all going to come to the show. But it really felt grassroots, even at its largest, even in like 2005, the biggest, arena year, 80 arenas, 20,000 people every single night. It always felt like family. It always felt like I'm not an overnight sensation at all. This is like a very slow trajectory towards something that work-wise I was very comfortable with. All the other stuff I had to learn, how to live years,
of course.
Years to come after that.
Well, whenever you're a trailblazer, you're going to face those types of challenges. Did you have difficult moments in between the years when you were touring and having major success, where it's the attention and the success isn't there, not because you're not successful, but because you're taking a break from that or you're not touring?
Oh yeah. Or even just sometimes it's just like lights out. You've had a moment, or something didn't work, or that movie's not going to be received. Mm-hmm. And stand up, it just prepares you for all that, because you do start to, well, not even start, but like you realize that a career is not a promised anything. All of those things that, zeitgeisting and lady luck, and those are all real things as well. You have to love what you do regardless of, I guess, how it's
externally validated.
Yeah, exactly. But it isn't to say that there weren't moments where it was like of extreme disappointment because you think you're hitting an ebb and it's a flow, or vice versa. I'm not sure which one's the bad part. Is the ebb the fucking bad part of the? We want to be ebbing,
They're
right?
both good.
Okay. So yeah, it was like, I think where I remember like having a crash and burn year at one point for whatever was going on. And it felt like I was disappointing my fans because I knew that the core group was like, man, we're ready for something new and electric. And it was almost like I had to tell them and tell myself, like, I'm not the new thing anymore. You know what I mean? I had my moment as the new thing. I'm going to make this career go as long as I can. And the people I love have a lot of different incarnations and in their careers. And I remember just like having to almost learn myself and educate my fans that it's okay that we can move on from that moment. That moment was a great moment. Let's recalibrate and do something else exciting together. And I continue to just live my life and career that way.
I think the example you gave about Aerosmith on another podcast that I heard you, I think applies here so well. If you can share it.
Yeah, no, I was saying like Aerosmith at one point, like they were experimenting with different sounds, and it was like sometimes even their fans were like, man, we wanted that sound again. We missed that 1978 album and it was like they would be out of vogue, but it was almost like the media had written them off like they were done. Yeah. And when I would see those things, or Aerosmith, and read those, it prepared me. I was like, if I make it, then there's probably going to be a point where I'm like that, which is like you're kind of back at seemingly square one. But, and I try to, again, like if I have the opportunity to mentor young people, artists, I always say like, that's why you keep your integrity every step of the way. That means if something works and that IP is from you, owned and operated, dreamed up, and then first pen to paper is how you want to see that come through, then the level of applause and even of monetization will not matter as much as you knowing you dreamed something up and made it come into the world. And when it doesn't work, and trust me, it won't. And when it's in fragments on the ground in front of you, you will, in your sadness, look at those broken pieces and say, "Those are mine."
Yeah.
And it really, I get emotional about it, because even when something's broken, even when it's destroyed in front of you and like, man, I wanted so much for this, there's a real beauty and knowing, hey, that thing that didn't work, I gave it everything I had. But if you don't complete those things truly from your own heart, and if you're just like maybe one little piece of, it won't mean that much to you. Yeah. And what does that mean? That means that maybe you don't really know how to strive for the next plateau. But it also means when something's in those fragments, it might not take the wind out of your sails the way it needs to in order for you to really hit
and learn from it
distances that you've never traveled.
Yeah. You're pointing out so many psychological principles that we study in medicine of the differences between intrinsic and extrinsic happiness. Where long term, a lot of people will think status, money, subscriber counts, all these things, tour sales are what gives them happiness. They think when I win the Super Bowl, I'm going to be so happy. Right, and the more studies we do, we realize that happiness doesn't last. It doesn't bring you the level of happiness that you thought it did. And if it did, it was for a day or two and you're just back to where you were before.
Right.
Versus the process that you talked about earlier, the connection you had with your mom watching Oprah, the process of having something crash and burn in front of your very eyes.
Yeah.
That's intrinsic happiness of things that no money can take away because it's yours. It's owned and operated and created by you, even if it's a failure.
Yeah. And when you invest into somebody, just emotional, right? Emotional currency. That possibility with watching somebody else who's at the start of maybe something I've had the privilege of doing maybe a bunch of times in my life. I've hit that target a lot. But when I'm seeing somebody set out that first time and I can be a little tiny fleck of hopefully the right positive reinforcement, that has been more gratifying than any 4-year project that worked or didn't work. Just seeing somebody get on their way.
Why is that?
I don't know.
I don't even, medically, I don't have a great answer.
I think there's a little part of all of us that maybe as we get older, that there's something so unabashedly glamorous about the first dream. In effect, there's just something that like you want that back, even though you're able to maybe be a person who constantly can go like, let's try this or throw this on the very first thing that you make that works, right? That you wind up and goes across the table. Like, I think that we're always looking for that first, wow, I did it. And so you can have that through your children. You can have that, I think, through, again, incredible collaborative love with a person. You can vicariously have that. But to be able to mentor somebody and see them have that first go is nothing beats it.
It's something that lives on past you, maybe, because we all want to live forever, but the human condition is that we absolutely can't.
Right.
When you do something nice for someone and you start off a career, that's something that might outlive you and maybe gives us some kind of reassurance.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to believe that energy is forever, and whatever that energy that becomes your makeup, you'd like to think, oh, all right, well, maybe if I morph into whatever or level up, that piece of you is part of it. Like just, okay, I'm on the next great adventure.
Yeah. When you talk about the pieces and still celebrating when things break, it touches me specifically because this is something you definitely don't know, and it pales in comparison to the successes you've had. I became a professional boxer this year.
This year?
This year.
Oh, wow.
And I had my second fight was on Showtime pay-per-view. And I got my ass kicked.
Okay.
This is a month ago.
Roll the footage.
Roll the footage of me getting my ass kicked. Excuse me. And I fought a UFC fighter, an MMA fighter who has a lot of experience, and I got my ass kicked. And looking back at it, I'm not as upset as I thought I would be. Like, obviously, initially there was a huge sadness and grief component to it, but I'm not as sad as I thought I would be because you feel like you did something. You did it on your own. You did it against what other people said. And you're like, it's my mistake to own.
Right.
So it's like that ownership component of even owning the mistakes and fuck ups is so powerful.
It's like you feel almost like Neo in the Matrix, and you can see all the numbers, a great failure, great success. Like I think that when you're talking about something like that, I go, I just look at, I've said this a couple of times recently on podcasts too. I live my life realizing that things are only ever falling together. Only. I've had things trauma in my life. I've gone through great trauma, and I've sat and I've dissected that trauma, and I can't find one piece of it that hasn't led to a greater sense of self. To me, that's like, oh wow, do you choose to look at something as it's a loss, I guess, on the card, right? But what does it mean for when you finally win, and how you win next is predicated on what you took from that loss.
Is that because you're optimistic that you're looking at it that way, or your upbringing? You're looking at it in a very positive post-traumatic growth mindset.
I have to. I have to.
Otherwise, you go to a dark place.
Yeah, because my fantastical imagination, here's the fun side of it. In comedy, I can tell a story 10 different ways. I used to say, like in the movie Minority Report, the way he would do that with the screens. I see that when I'm editing and I'm performing. I have a voice in my head that's basically like, remember that, don't do, like, and it's exciting. But it's the opposite when I start like investigating negativity. And so it's real easy for me to build a case of just upside down thinking. And so I have to choose to, my mechanics are waking up every day. I do positive affirmations every day. I do the silly thing where sometimes even if you don't want to smile, I make myself smile, even if it's fake, because I've learned that fires off the jargon that I don't know. You're going to tell me that, right? Okay. Something in the cerebellum where the limbic system is.
Yeah, look at that. You got the terms.
I just learned words of the brain one day just so I could sound smarter on people like you. But I have to, my mechanics, it's like, my dad was an athlete. The one thing that I really took from him is like, you don't get great at batting or pitching or without the mechanics, putting in the 10,000 hours. And I've put in the mechanics to look for the positive in things, because if I allow myself to go the other way, like I might linger in that way too long.
Where did you learn all these strategies?
I just always been, a curious person. And I would go to AA meetings when I was younger. I'm 50, but I've never had a drink in my life. I've never had a drink or a drug or pills or anything, nothing. I did take some Tylenol though while I had the flu, if I'm being very honest.
Well, that's okay.
But I would go to AA meetings. In fact, I would go 1991, 2, 3. I would go with friends that would sometimes do comedy gigs and say, I need a meeting. I feel like I want to drink. And I would say, can I go? I'll take you, or can I go? And I would sit in these rooms, and it was harrowing a lot. And it was like, it was sometimes negative and smoky, and yet there was a truth happening in here that I just craved. Craving it, because I wanted to be able to speak that truthfully about hating myself. I was like, man, I don't want to drink, but I feel all that, like I'm like a dry drunk, or that term I heard.
You were
once.
going for a support group, not having the issue that they on the outside have, but maybe on the inside have.
Exactly. And also, like I was, being transparent, I was dealing with alcoholism in my family. My dad drank, and it just made for convoluted youth. Okay. It was just, you never quite knew what we were going to get with my dad, who was both a brilliant and fascinating and loving person, as well as a person who just didn't always like himself and then didn't know how to communicate that. But I'd sit in these rooms, and I was so proud of these people, and I was so moved, emotionally sometimes moved. And I would always leave there feeling better about myself, jokingly be like, I feel better because I don't drink and I don't have to. But in those conversations with my friends leaving thereafter, thanking them and then saying like, I really hope that I can be that honest. I think I was looking for that level of honesty so I could understand myself better. I was years away from it, but that was the start of probably wanting to have a better understanding, sense of self.
Yeah, because I feel like superficially it's easy to say that you were looking at their problems and saying, well, mine aren't that big. But I think it sounds like it's way deeper than that, where instead you're actually grateful for them showing you this way.
Oh, sure. And then through the years, becoming friends with people in that organization, and it became so much more value. And it was like taking that and then applying that to stand-up. And what I was doing in stand-up was like, now I'm going, well, if I use this platform as a way to be truthful about first what I think is funny, and I'm going to entertain people in all of the ways that I think I'd like to entertain myself and entertain a few people. But then taking the element of Oprah or AA or comics that I love that we're talking about, real stark, caustic, topics, and going, maybe I could become the person that I want to be through performance, So I really was learning how to be the version of myself that can sit here and like talk about the whole thing, because I wouldn't run away from it on stage the way sometimes in life I felt like I was not ready to face myself.
Which is fair.
Yeah. That's all of us.
Okay with that. Yeah.
That's all of us. I think that it's okay to feel that way. It's for whatever our journeys are, it's a constant state of seasons. Things are, going to be suddenly in disarray, and maybe that's somebody once said, like, there's clarity in the chaos. And in chaos, sometimes it's real easy to, in a frantic moment, you're searching, and I try to tell people, just hold on to something and just look for what's even in that chaotic moment, because there's some truth in it that you might be like, I just needed this chaos to actually see very clearly. This one thing is solid.
That's the important piece for me that I need to hold on to.
Grab it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I'm curious what you think about the current state of, let's say, the younger generation, even in comedy. Where do you think that their biggest struggle is going to be?
Well, right now it seems like everybody feels like, talk about like, my journey and what it meant in those days to come out of like, just being on the circuit. And we knew it was going to take like 8 or 9 years to find your comedy voice and to make it. That was just kind of built in. All right, I'm starting in 1990. Most people are like, you're not going to know who you are for 5 years on stage. And we were like, okay, I guess I'll start.
Like a true apprenticeship.
Yeah. It was just the whole process of stand-up comedy through those first 10 years, before you even get to learning the business side of it, is just how do I really entertain people and like bring something real to the stage. But I think that right now a lot of young people are they think that everything has to be that one video that gets all the likes in that one moment. And if they put all that effort and energy into it, and then there's no likes or nobody seems to want to share it or care about it, then that's their entire value. And I feel like it's almost like a harder thud, because if you're doing that with everybody in a community like Comedy on the Road, you kind of all can look at each other and be like, man, this is a bad winter for all of us. But it's real in a world that seems so populated with the masses of the internet. It's real easy to feel alone on there. And I think that a lot of artists feel like, man, that didn't connect. And I think that like feels like it puts them back even further. So
because the competition now is more about who's going to have that one piece of viral content that's going to get more views than the other person, as opposed to, did it do well for me?
And you're up against not just being a comedian right now is like, man, it's an
attention.
It's also like so many people are doing a version of comedy, and there's people that are just at home saying like, being funny, on a social media app. And so there is so much more competition. And then you're looking at other people going like, wow, this person's only been doing it for several months, and why they're getting millions of looks and likes. And I don't know. And suddenly you're just like putting so many of the eggs in one basket of like, I need to make it in the next 3 months doing this thing online, or what is that going to mean for you?
I have a funny question for you. It's not funny at all, but it's a cool question. Let's delay your life 30 years.
Okay.
You're in this TikTok generation. You're starting up your comedy tour. You're starting up your comedy career. How do you think you fare?
I think I'd fare pretty well, because my philosophy is so drastically different from a time when a very small group of people were, in the digital realm or whatever that might be. And I saw that and I knew what to do. I felt like I was ahead of the pack, and then suddenly I was in there like, haha, this is like my claim to fame.
So what would you be using? What app? What kind of content would you be?
Yeah, you know what I'd be doing? I'd be in the business of brick and mortar.
Really?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, I would. And I would use the example of somebody like, I've been friends with Amanda Cerny for a lot of years. Amanda was somebody who was building up a Vine audience, and then whatever, she probably hit the wall of like, this is how many viewers I have, but she took those viewers and she just started going places and saying, this is where I'm at. I'm going to be at this mall. I'm going to be in this airport. I'm going to be, and then because people were showing up to meet this person that not very, very many people knew, but her fans knew, then the local news was like, who is Amanda Cerny? And then they were covering, why is this girl have 300, 500 people at an airport? And I watched her build her fan base out by being there, being out there. So keeping that just in the comedy lane, I would say, get off your computer. I wouldn't be posting any more clips. I wouldn't be trying to outdo anybody. And I'd be out there on the road, and I'd be back at what was the traditional. People are always going to want to laugh, and people are always going to want to laugh live in person. I think that as much as we like watching a comedy special, seeing somebody perform live stand-up comedy, it's like live music. It's just a whole different, it's a whole different feeling that, goes through your body experiencing that. And so that's the first place that I would be looking, is like, where could I get on the road and bring people physically to me, let the numbers be built up through the response from that by saying, I have an email list or I have a website, but I wouldn't be starting with the internet.
Wow, I would never guess you would say that.
I'd get off that. In fact, I would want to be a mystery to the internet. Wow. Look at Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle, in a lot of ways, is a mystery to the internet. Chris Rock.
But the generationally.
Well, now he's clipped up, and they're like, especially when he, but he's the perfect example for a lot of years, even though his stuff would go viral, like Dave Chappelle show. It was really fascinating because he wasn't online. Yeah. In any way, shape, or form. And I think that just harkens back to the original allure, I think, of show business, which a lot of people forget, which is mystique, mystery. Really like wanting to know more about. If somebody knows everything about you all the time, 24/7.
No scarcity, no FOMO, no none of these principles.
Yeah. You better be pretty damn interesting every day. Dynamic, like in real time, one of the most fascinating people in the world, to think you're going to keep an attention span of everybody all at once on this digital window. So
that's a lesson we need.
Pull back, try to, and also too, live a lot of life, because if you're populating your routine with things that are happening, outside in the real world, then that's what people are responding to. Nobody's just responding to like the same jokes that everybody's thinking of and making on the internet in real time, 24/7. That's not going to set you apart.
Yeah, because like the idea of all these young kids, their number one job is they want to be the YouTuber. Get a career first. Become an expert in something, whether it's education, being an astronaut, being a doctor, a comedian, and then bring that value to the internet.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because if you're great at your craft and then that's exploited through whatever, then more people are going to be like, damn, how did this person get so good at this? And I think that everybody is in real time saying like, watch me get better at guitar. And that's like coming to LA as a new comic. When a new comic comes to LA and says, I'm new to LA, what's your advice? And by the way, I don't believe in giving, especially comedians, advice other than like ways to protect your integrity or legal.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's so specific, like comedy, like nobody could tell you how to really be, what's funny for you. I'm not going to tell you how to be funny, but I will always tell somebody like, all right, here's the first thing you want to do. You don't want to grow here. Because you're going to, in the eyes of the industry, somebody's going to see you and you're always going to be that worst moment, or you're always going to be that misstep. And it's real hard to create the next version of yourself in front of the very people that are like, we saw you last year. And by the way, I'm 31 years in, and sometimes people will still say, oh yeah, no, we're fans of Dane. We've seen it. Do you want him to audition? No, we've seen it. Like, I look different. I've got a different vibe. I might have a take on this character, but it's real easy for this industry to typecast like that. So I would say to that person, like, get out of here. Go to anywhere else that you can grow, stink, get good. And then once you know you're dominant in your field, and what does that mean for comedy? Everything's getting a laugh. Not good nights, bad, like you're crushing it. Then you come back here and you're not here to make friends. And you're not here to get into some drama with the staff you're here to do one thing, kill it and show everybody I've arrived. I'm ready. Too many people, I feel like they think that if they're showing you their progress in real time, that is for some reason the value. I think it's a mistake to be showing people,
because you lose the allure.
Yeah. And I just think that, I think it's also just like people, when somebody comes out of nowhere with the next big idea, that's the clap that suddenly everybody goes, oh, what's happening right now? What is happening? As opposed to like, if we see you Truman Show style every single day, then I don't know if you get that like, head snap turn where everybody all at once goes, what's this?
Yeah.
And that's your moment to like come to life.
What's your relationship with medicine like, with healthcare?
As far as...
Do you have a primary care doctor that you trust? Do you do any kind of special regimens? What's your sort of... I
don't. No, I do have a primary care for many, many years, but I've been one of those people that, like I said, not only never any drugs in my life, but I just don't like to, I keep my, it's like, this is about as heavy as I go.
Okay.
Right. And so, health to me, it's more than just the stuff we've been talking about in terms of like what creativity and how that keeps me, well adjusted but it's really, I work out every day. I just think it's about being active. For me, it's always about like being active and taking care of my body, my health and wellness. And what I've learned about my body over the years is like when I add movement into my world, I'm at my most fit, my healthiest, most focused. So that's really like, it's all about nutrition.
A body in motion stays in motion. So that old mantra is very true.
Yeah.
You recently talked about, I think last night, about your colonoscopy experience.
I did.
What was that like?
I was a little nervous. Both my parents had succumbed to cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so it was, I talked to my sister Courtney about it, and I was like, man, this is a big one because, and probably another reason that, I've always wanted to stay as healthy as I could, because I was like, God forbid I have to ever fight that fight. I'd want somebody to say to me, man, you are ready to go. You're like, this is your prime candidate for like, early detection, super important, and taking this on. So it was really, really imperative and important for me to get the colonoscopy. And it was a funny experience because I was talking about like, going in, and the first thing the doctor says to me is, like, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
And then the anesthesiologist.
What's that like when like you're coming in for a
You feel good. You're like, all right, he's going to look out for me.
Hands,
he might take another look with the camera. This Dane Cook. Come on, one more go around. And then the anesthesiologist was like, quoting my stuff. And by the time I got into the room for the procedure, there was like 3 people and so I'm joking back, and that helped me to feel a little, less concerned about it, because I'm saying things like, well, you're about to see a side of me.
Like, suck my back, literally.
There's a whole, litany of good, bad one-liners I said, but getting that clean bill of health and being told like, no, you're absolutely in great shape inside and out was like, and more than anything, I called Courtney, my sister, and I was like, Mom and Dad would be really proud that I'm going to do this and take care of myself. My mom never got a colonoscopy. My mom was 62 years old, and
she had colon cancer.
Yep.
Wow.
And had no clue, and it was stage 3 by the time she figured it all out. My dad was 72, and he lifelong drinking, smoking, but
also colon cancer.
Pancreatic. Yeah. But it was a brutal, I say it's impossible because anytime I start talking about my parents and what that year, they both passed in 1 year.
Wow.
impossible to really describe like what that was in real time with them. But what I took from that and what I will always take from that is just taking care of my body and never putting those things off, and taking the time to really make sure that you're the healthiest that you can be.
So you're not taking life for granted. And, I relate very strongly to your situation. In 2010, I lost both of my grandparents and my mom. So similar situation of losing a lot of family members all at once, also to cancer. So it's like extra motivation to stay healthy, to encourage people to live a healthy life. So I got to thank you for putting that message out there.
Yeah. No, I especially young men, I think that really, need to be able to like voice that to each other, that like, no, that is there's no way to say it's a cool thing to do.
It is,
but
though.
It is when you get that call and it's either like you're good, or hey, there's something that like I'm glad we caught it. We can get in there and take care of you, sooner than later. It's like that, man, that just, you feel great. You truly feel in that moment of like, okay, I'm ready to take on the next challenge, because I know that physically I'm ready to do it.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of hyperbole, but by talking about colonoscopy on the show last night, you're saving lives. And that's not an exaggeration, because I see the reality of men who look up to other men like yourself. Star is doing this, say, you know what? I'm going to do the same for my family.
Right.
So I think it's a very powerful message when you share stories like that. So thank you. I was going to make a joke about Ernest Glenn.
Ernest Glenn.
I don't know why.
Where are you, Ernest Glenn? I wish I knew where Ernest Glenn was.
So we have to give a shout out, Ernest Glenn.
Ernest Glenn, for anybody who doesn't know.
If they're here, comment down below.
The first comic that I went up on stage as Ernest Glenn, and he was a comic that didn't show up. And so I pretended I was him. And that's how I got on stage. So I don't know where he is.
Get a colonoscopy.
Ernest Glenn.
Because probably the
Find
H,
me.
right?
Get online. Yes.
Dane, thank you so much for sharing.
Really appreciate it, man.
Open book and sharing all of your trials and tribulations, because it means the world to people to see success stories, but also share their vulnerabilities. So thank you for that.
Oh, man. Well, thanks for inviting me and allowing me to have such an incredibly prolific conversation.
Well, it was so cool to sit down with Dane Cook, someone I'd idolized from childhood, yelling, "Suck my back" to all my friends, which is one of his jokes. It was cool because we got to do it in LA in our hotel where we were staying for the Streamies. We won our second ever Streamie back-to-back, health and wellness. That was really exciting. I would say thank you for voting, but it wasn't a voting competition. So thank you for supporting, which makes the channel perform so well. But as you know, it's podcast question answer time. Remember, if you want your questions answered, leave a 5-star review if you enjoyed it. And then in the body of the review, give me a question and I answer them at the end of all the podcasts. Question numero uno. Aria, my family's always urging me to make my baby dress super warmly so they don't get cold and sick. But will that really happen? Does being cold make a baby sick? This is that classic conversation that we have as doctors. Does going out, like let's say if you were to go out naked into the winter, make you sick? The answer to that is really no, because cold itself doesn't make you sick. But being cold can potentially negatively, adversely, see how I put all those words in there, affect your immune system, where you may have a higher likelihood of getting sick. Because when you're cold, a few things happen. Your body starts shifting the blood away from the external parts of your body that are not super important for you to live and survive, to your inner organs. You lose less heat this way. But as a result, your nose starts getting less circulation, your lips start getting less circulation, your mucous membranes dry up, especially during the dry winter months where germs tend to hang around for a little bit longer period of time. And then as a result, a lot of your protection that's in your nose, your immune protection goes away. You create cracked lips, which creates a breeding ground for bacteria and potential infections that way as well. So yes. And your question initially, Aria, was about babies. Babies have even a higher likelihood because their immune systems are still developing and they don't control their body temperature as well as we do, because when like a grown person like myself is cold, we shiver, we can warm up because we have big muscles. But babies don't have big muscles, so they're a little bit more susceptible to the cold. So you want to make sure they are warm. Also make sure that they're not sweating either, because if they're too hot and just constantly wet all the time, that's not comfortable. Tony, if negative thoughts can create negative feelings, can positive thoughts create positive feelings? Absolutely. you frequently hear the statement that just by smiling, you create some positive emotions, even if you're unhappy. There's some truth in that. I think any doctor that will tell you to just smile when you're anxious or upset is not necessarily giving you the full picture of that research. Because what we see is if someone smiles, we see certain areas of the brain light up as if you're truly happy, whether or not that's just patterning in your brain occurring or something truly making you happy. We don't know that exactly. So I wouldn't say just smile when you're unhappy, but I will say thinking of positive thoughts and forcing yourself to think of positive thoughts, whether that be gratitude, compassion, excitement, and looking towards the future, can absolutely create warmth and positive feelings. And not just positive feelings, but positive changes in the neurochemistry in your brain. That's like the cool part about the brain. Whereas we used to say, oh, this mental health condition is a chemical disturbance and you could only correct it with medications. Untrue. You can change that chemical imbalance that's going on in the brain with things that are under your control, like your thoughts. So pretty cool stuff. Medium saucepan. What would happen if you received the wrong type of blood during a blood transfusion? Transfusion reaction, very dangerous, very big problem. Fever, if enough goes in, can lead to death. So that's why we're very careful about making sure that folks get the correct blood type. The time that we do this most thoroughly is in pregnant patients before they deliver, to make sure that we know if there is any RH cross compatibility. And there's a lot to look into and talk about with RH compatibility. But yes, do not receive the wrong blood type. That's why in the military, it's written right there on the dog tags, so they know exactly what to transfuse. Or you could use a universal donor blood and skip that process altogether. But that is a rare type of blood and expensive, and we want to save that for emergent uses only. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Keep the good questions coming. Keep the 5-star reviews coming. And by the way, go on Instagram and leave suggestions on who you want on the podcast. It's the Checkup Podcast on IG. As always, stay happy and healthy.